In this video, we demonstrate how to use Firebase extensions to build an authentication flow in a chat app without needing to write a single line of server-side code. In our demo, we'll build a simple flow that uses Firebase Auth to authenticate our users and then jumps directly into the chat experience, allowing them to chat with their friends. We'll use iOS and SwiftUI as a demo, but we can use any other platform as well, such as Android, Flutter, React Native, and even the vast landscape that is the web ecosystem. Now, what is the great thing about Firebase extensions? Firebase is a backend as a service provider, meaning that you don't have to write a single line of server code, but it is all managed by Firebase themselves. With that, you can focus on writing front-end code and focusing on the logic inside your application. When authenticating with an external service such as Stream, we need to create users there as well as managing the authentication flow, mainly using authorization tokens or JWTs. Usually, this would require a server that we need to manage and control and build on our own, but this is where Firebase extensions come into play. They make this process of building your own server obsolete. The way this works is that they create a number of cloud functions that will automatically create and delete users, which is triggered by the creation and deletion of users on the Firebase backend. In addition, the extension creates a cloud function that we can call to create authentication tokens for us. So let's get started by building the project. But before, if you're interested in the full code, you can also go to the link to the repository that I will add in the description that you can click directly after liking this video and subscribing to the channel. So let's get started. To get started, we create an iOS app and we need to configure Firebase to have the necessary authentication flow ready. So let's directly open up Xcode and create a new project. We want to have an iOS app and we name it Auth Demo. The rest needs to be SwiftUI, and with that we can hit Next and create the project wherever we like. Now, while this loads, we can switch over to our browser and go to the Firebase Console, where we can now create a Firebase project. We call it Auth Demo, whatever we want, and hit Continue. We don't want to enable Google Analytics for this one, which is fine. And now it will take a second to prepare the project, which we will skip and jump directly in. What we need to do now first is we need to enable authentication. So we go to the Authentication tab here and we hit Get Started. And for us, it's fine to go to Sign In method and for now activate email and password. We want the project to be very simple, so we don't enable the email link. We just hit Enable an email and password and save this. The next step is to add the Firebase SDK to our application. So we switch back over to Xcode. We hit File, Add Package Dependencies. And I have it here, but if you don't, you can go over to the browser and go to the Firebase iOS SDK GitHub link and copy this and paste it up here and it will appear as well. So for now we use Firebase iOS SDK. We hit Add Package, which will fetch the SDK and will then allow us to add it to our app. Once that's finished, we see the entire catalog of Firebase products that we can add to our application. Most of them we're not interested in, but we want to have Firebase Auth added to our target and also the Firebase functions, which we will later use to create authentication tokens. So after having that selected, we hit Add Package. It will fetch dependencies and install the package inside our app. Now we have the dependency for the Firebase SDK ready, but we still need to add the project itself to our application. And for that, we switch back to the console. And in the project overview pane, we need to add an iOS app. We need to take the bundle ID, which we can get from our project, signing in capabilities. And here we have our bundle identifier. This will of course look different for you, but we can add this here. We don't want to give it a nickname and no App Store ID. So we register the app we download the Google Service Info plist file and move it to the root of our project. So let's do this. I have my project here, and now I can drag the file over from my download folder. I want to copy files to destination. Now with this done, everything is ready, but now we still need to initialize the SDK inside our app. So we do that now. For that, we open up our auth demo app file, close the sidebar, and here we now first need to import the Firebase core module, and then we want to call code on the launch of our application, which we will use the app delegate class for. And for that, we call the did finish launching with options function, which will return a Boolean. And inside there, we call Firebase app.configure, which will automatically read the values from our plist file that we just added. And then we simply return true. However, this won't be enough, because while we created this, we're still not calling it correctly. So inside our auth demo app, we will also add this line, which says add UI application delegate adapter with the app delegate class that we just defined, which will automatically call this, and upon launching our app will configure the Firebase app. With this, we have finished integrating Firebase into our application, and we can now start with building the login flow. With Firebase now being configured inside our application, we will now build a very simple login and sign up flow, which I will not cover in much detail because this has been done by many others before and way better than I could ever do. So let's jump into Xcode again. Let's go full screen here. And let's first create a new file, which will be a Swift file. And we'll call it auth state. We will use a simple enum here, which we call auth state, to track the current state of authentication. And for this, we have a few cases. One is loading. One is if a user is signed in, and we'll add the user ID here as well. Then we have a case for being signed out, as well as having an error case, in which case we want to show a message. Next, we want to create a new file again, which will again be a Swift file, and we'll call this Firebase Auth view model. And as you can already expect, this is going to be the view model that will handle all the Firebase authentication flow. Now what we first need to do is we need to import Firebase Auth, and then we use the observable macro to define a class, as we called it Firebase Auth view model. First, we need to add a private set variable of auth state and initialize it with the loading state. This means we can only change this inside our class. Next, we create an initializer here, and inside this we want to listen to any auth changes from Firebase. So we create an auth instance, and we add a state did change listener, which will give us the auth object as well as a user. Now we can simply check if we have a user, we can update our auth state to be signed in, and we add the UID from Firebase as the user ID. If this is not the case, we are in the signed out state. Now, if we're signed out, we of course want to both sign in or sign up. So let's first add a sign in function with email and password as parameters. And we simply call the sign in function from Firebase with email and password. We get a result, and we will use this. If there's an error, we change our auth state to be an error state with the message that we get. And then we take the user ID from our auth result. And if this is null, we return. And if not, we are changing to a signed in state with the user ID that we just received. We also have a sign up function with the same parameters. And instead of the sign in method, we call the create user method with mail and password, and we get a result back. If there is an error, we update our auth state with the error message. If the user ID is there, we will update our auth state with the signed in property. And I just saw a simple error here. There is a double backslash. So now our error message will be shown correctly. With that in place, we have the logic, but we don't have the UI yet. So let's change this. We create a new file from template. And this time we want to have a Swift UI view, which we will call login view. We close the sidebar because we don't need it for now. And inside here, we now need to first have a few state properties, which will be a view model of the type that we just defined and a mail and password state properties. We first fix the preview by adding this parameter, and now we can start building up the UI. So first we create a VStack, and inside we first show a text which says login and sign up, and you can see it building up on the right here because we love previews, right? Anyways, next we create a form which has a text field of mail and a text field of password. This is not best practice, you should use a secure field, but I just want to keep it easy and simple for this tutorial. Next we have an HStack with two buttons. First we have a button for signing up, which is called sign up, and then we have a spacer and another button which we will use for signing in and calling the sign in function. This is a very rudimentary solution. Like I said, you need to do better here with specifying the input, but I want to keep things really simple for this tutorial. So please kids, don't try this at home. We have our login view in place, but what's remaining now is to actually show this inside our app. For this, we will switch back to the content view. We close the sidebar, and instead of showing this, we will now show the login state, depending on the current authentication state of our view model. For this, we first get rid of our entire body here, and we start by adding a view model, which is going to be a state property here, and we initialize the Firebase Auth view model. Next, inside our body, we now switch over the view model's auth state property, which remember is an enum that we just defined. So we now have to handle all cases. So first we show a progress view, so a loading indicator, whenever we're in the loading state, and we make sure it expands to fit the entire height and width of the view. Then in the error case, we do a similar thing, but instead of showing a progress view, we show a text with the error message, and we show it in red because errors are always bad. Then in case we are signed in with a user ID, for now we show a simple text, but we will replace this later on with our chat view. And finally, in case we're signed out, we will show the login view that we just defined with some padding. And so we already see on the right, it automatically updates our preview here with the email and password text fields that we can now update. Now with this, our application is ready to have users sign up and sign in. But in order to have the magic of Firebase extensions, we need to do one more thing before we run the app and test our flow. With this, we have the Firebase authentication flow finished, but we still need to create the one for stream. So for that, we would usually now create a server that would now handle the user creation, the user deletion, as well as the token generation to authenticate with the stream backend. This is exactly where the extension comes into play. So let's head over to our Firebase Console. And under the build category, we can go to extensions, and we can now hit the Explore Extensions Hub. And here we can now say, let's search for Stream Chat, and we already see the Authenticate with Stream Chat extension. Let's first install this, and then we can later demonstrate how it works. We need to choose a project. So we created the Auth demo project. We're now installing this extension. And here it says we need to be on the Blaze plan to use this extension. So let's upgrade our project to continue here. And once that is done, we're now on the Blaze plan. So we can now review the APIs enabled and resources created. And we can already see it will add a bunch of cloud functions that we will later take a look at. And we create secrets for the Google Secret Manager. And for that, we need to enable a few things. We need to enable the cloud functions inside our project. We need to enable the secret manager, as well as the artifact registry. Now all of these are enabled. So we can hit next. We can review the access granted, which is just the usual secret manager access, because it will need to access the stream API key as well as the stream secret to create users and tokens. So we grant access to the service agent. And now we need to configure our extension. We can define a location for our cloud functions, which is optional. You can select the one that is closest to you. So if you scroll down this list, wherever you're located, select the one closest to you. For me, this will just stay as US Central. Now all that's remaining is we need to have an API key as well as an API secret for the Stream API. For this, we head over to the Stream dashboard, which you can find at dashboard.getstream.io. We can either sign up for free, or we already have signed up and have a project. If not, we create one. I already have one, which is called Firebase Extensions Example. And under the chat messaging here, we already see we have our API key as well as a secret. So let's copy over first the API key. We can paste this here and hit create secret, which will create a secret inside Firebase Secret Manager. And then we also copy the API secret here, paste it and hit create secret again. With this done, we could now configure some advanced parameters, which we actually don't need, but we just hit install extension. This will jump to this window here and will now install the Authenticate with Stream Chat extension. It already says this should take 3 to 5 minutes, so we can now grab a coffee, enjoy life, and get back to our screen in just a few moments, which I will skip until now. And it finished installing. So what we can now see is when we go to build and functions, we will now see that we have 4 cloud functions defined. We have one that is triggered whenever a user is created. We have one that is triggered whenever a user is deleted. And we have 2 that we can use for requests. So we can send HTTPS requests to them. This one will be the interesting one, which is called getStreamUserToken. The other ones are automatically executed whenever a user is created or deleted, and the logic inside them will create a user or delete a user on the Stream backend. So nothing that we need to implement, we can simply use these, or they will be triggered automatically. With this, the extension is configured, and we now can finish the setup inside our application to show the chat functionality. Now the extension is configured, but it's not being used yet. For that, we need to actually call the cloud function to authenticate users. The rest will happen in the background. So let's get started with the Stream Chat initialization. And for that, we first need to install the dependency for the Stream Chat Swift UI package. We can head to Stream Chat Swift UI on GitHub and copy the link here. And then we head back to our application in Xcode. We go to File, Add Package Dependencies. We can either paste the URL here or we have it pre-selected. And we can now hit Add Package. And we will use the Stream Chat Swift UI one and we add it to our target. Next, we need to actually initialize the chat client inside our application, which fortunately is quite easy because we can just head to our auth demo app file, which might be called different depending on how you named your project. And inside here, we first import Stream Chat and Stream Chat Swift UI. Then we head to our demo app struct, which is the main entry into our application. And here we first create a new state variable. We call it Stream Chat, which will be of type Stream Chat. And then we lazily initialize this, ensuring that this will only happen once inside our application. We create a config with the API key of our project. We configure local storage to be enabled and specify the group identifier, which is going to be our bundle ID here. Then we initialize the client with the config and return this. With the client now being initialized on the init of our auth demo abstract, we can now initialize the stream chat here with the client that we have just initialized as a computed property. Now this initializes the stream chat object that we can now reference everywhere inside of our application due to a wonderful dependency injection mechanism. We will put this to use, but for now we want to first create a new view model here to handle all the stream related authentication flow, which will be a new Swift file. And we call it stream auth view model so that we don't get confused with the Firebase Auth view model. To get started, we will first import StreamChat Swift UI, as well as the Firebase Functions package. Remember, we added the dependency at the very beginning of this tutorial. Next, we create another view model, this time call it StreamAuth view model using the observable macro. Inside, we have a functions property that we will initialize by having an instance of the functions object. And then we add a connect user function that we need to authenticate with the stream backend. We will use an ID as well as a client as parameters because we can easily access the chat client inside our view later on. Here we just call the Firebase cloud function that we have just seen inside our Firebase console with this simple call, and we add the UID parameter with the ID that we get as a parameter handed towards the connect user function. If there's an error, we log it, and otherwise we extract the result string from the result data and then create a token, which is going to be a token object from the raw value of the result string that we have received from the cloud function. And if that's successful, we call the client.connectUser function with the user info with the ID, and we authenticate using the token. And in case there's an error, we log this. Of course, if we connect the user, we also want to be able to disconnect the user from the chat client, which will be simply a call to the client.disconnect function. Notice that this is async and this as well. So we need to ensure when we call this, we take the correct measures. Speaking of calling this, let's create a new file here, which is going to be a Swift UI view, which we will call chat view. Let's get rid of the content here again, and let's fill this up with the necessary chat components from StreamChat. We want to show a chat inside here, and for that we will use the pre-built Swift UI components, which you can check in the documentation, which I will leave a link to below in the description of the video. For now, we close the preview here and we close the sidebar. And the first thing we need to do is we need to import StreamChat and StreamChat Swift UI. And then we can use the dependency injection mechanism that I mentioned, which will be using a add-injected property here with the chat client, which we can now access inside our view. Next, we will use a user ID, which will be an input parameter to the chat view itself. And to make the preview compile, we add a user ID with a very random name. We also create a view model of the type that we just defined, so the StreamAuth view model. And inside the view itself now, we create a chat channel list view, which is part of the package of StreamChat Swift UI, which will give you all the chat functionality right out of the box with nothing to do. However, one thing we need to do is upon initialization of this view, we want to call the connect user function that we just defined. And we need to make this a task because of async await. And we hand in the user ID as well as the chat client. And since we are connecting, we also want to disconnect. So whenever our view disappears, we add another task and we disconnect the user. So whenever we close our chat window, we will disconnect, and upon opening it up again, we will connect the user again. Now the only thing remaining is that we open up the sidebar again, we go to content view, and we have our switch statement over the auth state of our Firebase view model. And in case we are signed in with a user ID, we don't want to show this text anymore, but we can now replace this with the chat view we defined, and we hand in the user ID. With this, we can now run our project and see if what we have done actually works. So finally, let's run the project and see what we have built over the course of this tutorial. We hit the command run option and we can jump to the simulator here, and we can start by entering an email address and enter a very secure password. With this, we can now hit the sign up button, which will take us to a stream chat flow with nothing showing because we haven't started any chats yet. So let's just simulate this with some magic, and we will see new data will pop up like magic because I've used a tool to generate some mock data. So as we can see, everything went smoothly and our demo works perfectly. So I just quickly want to go over what we have achieved again. So we created an authentication flow using Firebase authentication as well as the stream backend. And we have done all of this without writing a single line of server-side code. I want to quickly show you what actually happened behind the scenes now. So if we go to our Firebase console, we see that we now have a user here with an email address, and we create this just today. And now we also have this user UID. Now, in order for stream chat to actually work, the thing we needed to do was we needed to create a user on the stream backend as well. So if we switch back to our stream project and we go to Explorer and users, we see there is this user now created. And if you look at the UID, it is the same one that we have for our Firebase user. So this worked. We have created this user. He has the same email address than we registered in Firebase. So all of this got synced automatically using the Firebase extension. So I think this sums up what we have achieved quite well, and it also demonstrated why Firebase extensions can be so powerful, because we don't need to write any server-side code and enjoy just focusing on building the front end, the application that we like and love, without needing to focus on anything else. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like it and subscribe to our channel. And I want to wish you a very wonderful rest of your day. See you in the next one. Bye.